Hi everyone, this is Doug Morrison, and I'd like to welcome you to this episode of Teach for Effect, with more tips on how to be a better teacher, trainer, or instructor, and, most importantly, to make sure your students actually learn what you're teaching. In this episode, we're going to look at how to use questions in your teaching. When you teach, you have a wide variety of teaching aids and techniques that you can call upon. You can use videos, training aids, stories, illustrations, and so on, but one of the most powerful aids that you can use, and my personal favorite, is a good, thought-provoking question. In fact, when I teach this course live, I do most of it simply by asking questions. I do very little actual lecturing. Using questions effectively is a bit of an art form. It's not easy at first. It takes practice to develop it fully. This doesn't mean you shouldn't use it. What it does mean is you should start learning how to do it now and practice questioning. In fact, start right now with the next lesson you teach. With a little practice, you'll learn how to quickly and easily formulate good questions to go along with each stage of your lesson. Knowing what makes a good question is the first step in the process. First, keep in mind that students learn best when they think a new thought into their own understanding. Learning is easier and surer when they work something out for themselves than if you merely state a fact. Whenever you ask a question, you make your students think and reason on their own. For example, if your students are working towards an objective, don't tell them what to do or how to do it. Instead, ask leading questions which draw on what they already know to reason out how to accomplish their new goal. Anytime something is learned for the first time by anyone, this is the process they go through to make a new discovery. Make your students discoverers of the truth, rather than mere passive listeners. Another purpose of questions is to arouse and maintain the interest of your students. I mentioned in a previous video that I had a student who would often ask, "Is this on the exam?" When you lecture, your students can fall into a "so what" attitude. When you ask questions, it involves them. They feel as if they have an active part in the lesson. If they're thinking and developing their own ideas, you'll keep them interested. As I was often told when learning to be an instructor myself, telling is not teaching. Next, you can use questions to guide and correct the thoughts of your students. Don't say "wrong" if they don't get the right answer. Instead, ask them a question which will help them to see on their own that they're wrong, that there's a flaw in their reasoning, and that they need to rethink their answer. By asking a series of questions, you can actually teach a whole lesson without once lecturing or giving your students information. While this can take practice and time, it's a skill well worth developing and one which I use myself a lot. Give your students a problem, or pose a question or series of questions, and turn them loose to discuss and debate the answers. It might surprise you what they can teach themselves. With your guidance, of course. Finally, questions can be used to evaluate both how well your students have learned and how well you've taught. I've had several teachers over the years that were proud of the fact that most of the class failed their exams. I feel that the real failure, if this happens, is the teacher. Use questions at each stage of the lesson to evaluate how good a job you've done and whether or not your students are ready to proceed to the next stage. If they aren't ready to proceed, you'll have lost them before you even begin. Use questions to discover any weak areas and reteach them, a different way if necessary, to ensure that you've successfully taught your lesson. Of course, doing this means that you might only be able to test a small sample of the class if it's a large one, so it might be advisable to use a quiz in such cases. But in a smaller setting, it works very well simply asking the questions. And then at the end of the lesson, I might ask questions such as, how can you use questions to promote thought in the minds of your students? Or, why do questions keep students involved and interested in your lessons? Or, what is the drawback of using questions to evaluate learning and how can you overcome it? If you have your own favorite teaching tips, or if you found something especially helpful in this video, please leave a comment below and share it with others. If you found this video helpful, then please help me to keep producing this kind of content by liking, sharing, and subscribing. And remember, if you do subscribe, Hit that notification button so that you'll know when new content comes out. If you teach something your students need to learn, then check out my course, Teach for Effect. That's the situation I was in when, as a flight instructor, 80% of my students had to pass their flight tests on the first try, or I would lose my privileges as an instructor. In fact, records were kept of every student I trained, so any deficiencies in their flying meant that I'd be tested on how I taught it. I've compiled the course from what I learned through 40 years of teaching experience, having taught everything from Sunday school to commercial aviation, both across North America and overseas. It can be taught online, both in groups and one-on-one, and if you prefer, it's also available as an online self-paced course that comes complete with a workbook and homework assignments that you can use to help apply what you learn in your own lessons. It's available right now at a reduced price, so check it out in the link posted below this video. See you next time, and in the meantime, keep on teaching effectively.